I like writing adventures, and one-shots are good for so many different things. Maybe you've been playing a cleric for the last 18 months and somebody's missing a game, and have a one-shot so that you can play the barbarian and do some of the hacking and slashing once in a while. Maybe there's a new system that came out and you want to see if it's the kind of game that the players would really dive into. We've got MCDM's thing has been announced. We've got Daggerheart from Critical Role is coming out. Pathfinder 2 Remastered to try out. Eventually D&D 1, although I'm going to call it 5.5 like the rest of the YouTube community seems to have decided, so that we're all talking about the same thing. And then, of course, there's introducing new players to the game. And that's where I want to focus this time. I had some friends coming over and they wanted to play with their family. They're young children and they wanted to play together. So they asked me to run a game for them. And I agreed because I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. And as I said, I like writing these things. So it's down there. Grab it, use it. Let me know what you think about it. But we're going to talk about putting together adventures for new players. I did this once before with the Goblin video. And while I stand by that, I think that's a good adventure. Maybe you want something different. So in this case, it's a story that is using the Prince and the Pauper gone wrong as kind of the foundation for that story. I use those kind of stories for new players because, like the Goblins, it bootstraps them into knowing what's going on. Yes, it's a trope, and everyone knows these tropes. But in a world where you're going to play a thing where you have this character sheet that you don't know what all these numbers mean, and you don't know how you're supposed to behave, and they told you that you can do anything that you want, and you're going, anything I want is a lot of things, it gives them something to attach their understanding to and go, okay, I get how this story is going to work out. When you meet some potential new players and you come up and say, hey, do you want to play Dungeons & Dragons? They don't know yet what that is unless they've been watching, something like a Critical Role or Dimension 20, or they've been watching Stranger Things and now they're kind of interested in it. But if you tell them, hey, this is going to be every week for the next 6 months or every 2 weeks for the next year or whatever the time frame and meeting is, that can be really intimidating and like, I don't know if I like this game and you're asking for a pretty big time commitment from me. I don't think I'm up for that. But if you present it as, hey, come over for a week, we're going to actually play it, and I'll show you how it's played, and we'll go through all the stuff, and, it's 4 hours, and you'll get to eat some pizza and drink some soda or an adult beverage of some kind, and we'll talk about video games that we've been playing and what we've been watching on Netflix, and we'll kill some monsters and get some loot and have some adventures together. That's probably more manageable to their mind of like, okay, that's not a huge commitment. It sounds fun anyway to do all those other things and a little bit of a party with the context of slaying monsters and playing Dungeons & Dragons. So yeah, sure, I'm up for that. But we need to distill it down for them to the things that make role-playing games role-playing games. So we need to dispense with a lot of stuff. We don't have time for you to go out into town and gather the information. New players wouldn't necessarily know the traditions of, well, you can talk to the captain of the guard. You can talk to maybe the mayor or burgomaster or whatever. You can talk to the innkeeper. They'll probably have some storylines for you. You can go talk to the blacksmith. We don't have time for you to go talk to the blacksmith. We don't have time for you to negotiate at the temple for potions. We don't have time for you to figure out that you should go get silver weapons to fight the Wererats that you're inevitably going to be fighting. We don't have time for that kind of stuff. So we do need to kind of strap that all in and bake it down to its most basic parts, because we do still want to have some conversation that is fundamental to a role-playing game. In this adventure, I started them off in a tavern, because is there anything more tropey than starting in a tavern? I submit that there is not. But that's okay, they've never done it before, and starting in a tavern is a classic D&D thing to do. We do it because there's an opportunity there for the players to all introduce their characters and talk about who they're playing, what they seem like, and behaviors, and create this moment where you introduce yourself and recruit the barbarian to your team like some kind of homicidal version of a pickup basketball game. But with new players, they don't know how that conversation is supposed to happen. So you'll get very awkward behavior of them just kind of staring at you.
Is your name Andy?
I don't know how to answer that.
So we need to give them a way to dip their toes into the shallow end of the pool, so to speak. For me, one of the ways that I like to do that is to have an NPC at the very start of the game. This NPC walks up to you and starts talking. Maybe they have a quest hook, maybe they do not. In this adventure, it's Guy Richmond comes up to them and says, I've got your drinks here. Did you all decide what it is that you wanted to order, or do you need a little bit of time? And then he gives them the drinks, and they have a menu. That means they have to decide something about what their character drinks and what their character eats. That is a small, very silly, not story-oriented thing at all that is not on their character sheet. They have to decide, does my dwarf drink ale? Is he a stereotypical dwarf? I saw that that's what they do when I watch Lord of the Rings or something, so sure, that's what they do. Or maybe they decide, no, I'm not going to do that. My dwarf drinks water. He orders water. That's what's at the table. In which case, they've decided something very specific about it. Maybe they just drink whatever the players drink. That's fine, but they've still made a decision about who their character is that is not on the character sheet. And that means that they've started thinking ever so slightly about this sheet as a person that they are playing. We don't want to leave them there because, again, they don't have those muscles yet. They don't know what they're supposed to go do. So we want to motivate the adventure. In filmmaking, there's an idea that you want to follow the action. When you go see a play, curtain comes up and everyone's standing there on stage. It waits for someone to enter into the scene. And that person is who we follow, and they may go talk to somebody. They may or may not be the main character, but this is what interrupts steady state of the scene. So we have the two elves enter in. They are Relgos and Elbrus. Elbrus is an elven noble who is disguised as a commoner because he is here to meet Engelis, his love, and they're going to go run away together and leave this noble life because in my city that I was building previously, the elves and the humans don't get along. The humans are kind of second-class citizens and the elves are the nobility. And he doesn't think that way, so he's going to join her. Little does he know, that is not what Engelis has in mind. An adventure starts. When he goes over, Elbrus goes to talk to Engelis. I have him say, they start whispering. The players are going to want to know what's being said. And the moment they do that, they're going to ask, well, can I listen in? Can I read their lips? The players aren't going to know how to take what they want and translate that into their skills. And this is our opportunity to do that, to say, oh, you want to listen in? Give me a perception check. On your character sheet, you'll see there it says perception. It's got a number. Roll your d20. Add that bonus. That is your perception check. And you can listen in. The other players are going to want to do that too, and that is a little bit of dogpiling.
Oh boy! A dog pile!
But for the moment, yeah, of course the other characters try to listen in. Let them all do that. They listen in, they hear the conversation that's going on at the table. Before they get to decide whether they're going to go over there and talk to them or not, we want to drop combat in on them. And the players get that second piece of the Dungeons & Dragons pie, so to speak. They're having combat in and again with a bunch of people that are trying to kidnap Elbrus. And at the end of it, Elbrus is gone. So is Engelis. Relgos is unconscious. The merchant / thieves that were hiding there are hopefully dead. Or maybe they took some initiative and they captured one. Now they're going back to some conversation. They're going back from combat to skills, using the skills to gather some information to figure out what it is that they need to go do about Elbrus. When we're planning the monsters that we want to use with new players, I like to plan for some things that they are really familiar with. In the previous adventure, it was goblins. Here, it's thieves, human beings. And then something that is fantastical. Introduce them to some of the weird monsters that Dungeons & Dragons or fantasy has in store for them. Previous adventure, that was spiders. Here it's an otiug, and it's a gelatinous cube. And the otiug in particular is an interesting one for them to deal with because they could talk to this thing. I'm going to have the otiug, when it attacks them, talk to them telepathically, because that's an ability that the otiug has, to say, food? And that will hopefully clue in the players that they could talk to this thing. And they might decide to just kill it, in which case it's perfectly fine. Or they might decide, oh, no, wait, no, not food. At which point, now the otiug, being a young otiug, per what's described in the Monsters Manual, doesn't really want to eat people unless there is nothing else left. We'll go,
fish are friends, not food.
The players may come back to this later as they delve further into the sewers, into the Thieves Guild, and go, what about that otiug? Could we somehow convince it to go along with us to go fight the thieves. By all means, let them try that. Kind of fun, kind of funny, and an interesting way to solve the problem. We have a dungeon that's pretty straightforward because we don't want to do something that's going to be more than 4 hours. We want them to get in there, we want them to finish, and we want them to have fun doing that and get all the rewards in the end of the story in this adventure. In this 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever you got to play, we want to make sure that this gets completed. So as you're looking at time, you may need to move the gelatinous cube. You may need to reduce some of the thieves later in the dungeon so they do get through all of it. But that's why there's so little encounters, and it's also why the map is more straightforward. It's fairly linear, but they can't get lost in the sewers and go totally off the rails and not find their ways to the Thieves Guild. But we do have challenges of, there's a trap in here. It's not meant to hurt them so much as show them that the thieves and the enemies in a Dungeons & Dragons game think tactically and realistically and not just like a scripted AI. We have a puzzle with how they maneuver the sewer in a north room of the sewer, because that allows them to raise and lower the water. And they might go, well, what if we raise the water in the sewer and flood it so it's harder for the thieves? Or no, maybe we should lower it so it's easier for us to get around in case we get knocked into the water. Or maybe we should just speed up the sewer water so that if we knock the thieves into the water, they're going to get washed away, and we trust our ability to negotiate that more than we believe the thieves could do so. Or maybe lower it all so that that Otyugh can come with us into the thieves' den. That allows them some opportunity to start thinking about those kind of solutions to some of the problems that Dungeons & Dragons is going to provide. Then we have the gelatinous cube, because while dragons are in the name, dragons are a traditional fantasy monster. They're all over fantasy, of course, but the gelatinous cube is a D&D monster. It's such a weird thing that there's a big cube of jello that's going to dissolve me. This is super weird and kind of cool. Is fun, funny, and yet dangerous and challenging for them. And because I was planning for children to play this game, I didn't want anything super horrific. I could have gone with doppelgangers or gricks or giant spiders or anything like that. But I thought the weird tentacle monster that was the Otyugh, that's kind of funny and is talking to you about whether you're food or not, and a giant cube of jello were strange and alien enough to introduce the ideas of Dungeons & Dragons, but also safe enough that I'm not going to cause any kids nightmares. And that they would find it funny and amusing, because funny and amusing is a good way to engage people and want them to play your game. A one-shot, more than most D&D adventures, allows you that opportunity for closure of the adventure. So often in a D&D adventure, we're just going from adventure to adventure, and we don't really get an opportunity to provide a closure to the story. So we go through all the dungeon, we defeat the Otyugh or make friends, and we defeat the gelatinous cube or not, because he had to remove it because time crunch. I'd keep it in and remove some thieves if it was me personally. And then we fight Luca and Engelis, and we rescue Elbrus. And then at the end, we're going to button this up with a conversation with Elbrus, where Elbrus is dealing with the betrayal of Engelis, and love turned sour and into hate, and how we're going to convince him as players that these are not representative of humans, and that they get an opportunity to have an impact in this person's life, and that this person is going to go on to do something else. In a full campaign, that would be an opportunity to go turn this person into an ally or into an enemy that is plotting or helping them along and building that campaign. And that gives us a little bit of that taste for these new players that we're hoping that maybe one day they will want to play a full campaign and they'll join us for an adventure in Dungeons & Dragons again. I hope you and any friends that you play with really enjoy the adventure. Let me know how it worked out for you down the doobly-doo. I never know if these things are useful or not to people. I just put them out there, again, because I like writing them. I was going to write this anyway, so it felt nice to make it look good and look like a thing. So I could give it to the kids, because they're going to run D&D for themselves and their friends. So it was fun to be able to say, here's your adventure. Until next time, Dungeon Masters, remember, you're a player too. Try to have some fun.